You walk into a room and the air shifts. You feel a tug at your chest, a coldness behind someone's smile, a weight like someone else's grief sitting on your lap. And you leave exhausted, as if you carried a stranger home. What if every time that happened you weren't broken or overly sensitive? You were using a finely tuned instrument the wrong way. That inversion is the heart of what Carl Jung taught us about deep perception. Jung noticed that certain people receive more information from the psychological environment, not because they're delusional or weak, but because their nervous systems learned to read other people early as a survival skill. He suggested we take those experiences seriously, study their function, and ask, how did this ability evolve in you, and how could it be retrained to serve you rather than drain you? In this talk, I want to map those capacities, name them clearly, show how they are commonly misused, and give you practical, repeatable practices to reclaim them. By the end, you won't be told to toughen up. You'll be offered a pathway to become what I'll call a conscious empath, discerning, boundaried, and powerful without being invasive. Jung did not treat sensitivity as weakness. He saw it as material for individuation, the lifelong process of integrating unconscious material into conscious awareness. In that sense, empathic perception can become part of a spiritual path, not in a mystical escape from reality, but in the disciplined integration of shadow, projection, and inner complexity. Before we go deeper, if this way of approaching empathy through Jungian psychology resonates with you, subscribe to the channel. This is where we continue developing this kind of disciplined inner work together. The first thing to understand is origin. Many empathic habits begin in childhood. A child in a chaotic home learns quickly which facial twitch means to be quiet, which voice predicts violence, which smile masks danger. Those early adaptations are brilliant. They keep you alive. But brilliance hardened into habit can calcify into a default that runs you long after the danger has passed. Jung framed many such patterns as adaptations of the psyche, functional, not simply pathological. Once we see them as tools that can be repurposed, we stop blaming ourselves for being too much and start learning the manual that was never handed to us. Ability 1, emotional field perception. This is the sense of the room, the mood you feel as soon as you cross a threshold. It's not telepathy. It's your perceptual system taking in tone, posture, micro-expression, and the residue of interactions and synthesizing them into an effective ambient sense. When used well, it alerts you. This place is tense, be cautious. When misused, it becomes absorption. You take the field into your body and treat other people's feelings as if they are yours. Your inner script for this misuse often sounds like, I need to hold this so they don't break, or I must fix the mood. That opens the door to exhaustion and emotional indistinctness. The corrective practice is the "is this mine" pause. The moment a strong mood lands on you, stop, name it silently. This feeling is present. Then ask, is this mine? Take 3 measured breaths. If the feeling loosens and your baseline returns, it was likely projected onto you. If it stays fast and specific to one person, it may be theirs. Practice this as a micro-habit 3 times a day for a week. It rewires your system to separate your affect from ambient affect. Picture this. You enter a coffee shop and sense heaviness. Your first reflex is to soothe, but you pause. Is this mine? 2 breaths. You notice a man at a table, shoulders hunched, not looking anyone in the eye. Because you paused, you don't carry the weight. Instead, you make a practical choice. You sit a little further away, keep your coffee short, and finish your work without absorbing his mood. This small habit reduces the number of evenings you spend carrying strangers' sorrow home. If you've ever walked into a room and immediately felt the emotional weight shift, write this in the comments. I feel the room. Just that sentence. It helps you recognize that this sensitivity is real and shared. Ability 2, unconscious pattern recognition. This is the rapid, nearly instantaneous profiling you do when meeting someone new, a surge of certainty about their reliability, danger, or warmth. Jung would see this as an intuitive pattern apparatus that recognizes cues from body language, speech cadence, and relational history. It's efficient. But empaths often mistake that flash of patterning for a personal judgment they must prove to themselves by staying close and testing it out. The misuse looks like you feel a flag and think you must expose yourself to prove it wrong or save the person from whatever you sense. The corrective practice, the trust tag. When your pattern recognition flags someone, mentally tag it. Flagged, maintain distance. Do not immediately act on the feeling by offering intimacy or proof of your intentions. Instead, slow your engagement, observe, and let information accumulate. Use small boundary experiments. Limit conversational topics. Keep meetings brief. Notice whether your sense refines or dissolves. Over time, this trains your pattern recognition to be a guide for protective navigation instead of a mandate for rescue. Imagine dating someone new. You get a flash that something will be rocky, but you counter with the instinct to reassure them or to fix things. Instead, you apply the trust tag. You limit the number of meetings in the early weeks, keep communication clear, and note whether their actions align with their words. Your pattern recognition does the rest. Either the flag resolves with evidence of reliability, or it strengthens and gives you information to step back with dignity. Ability 3. Shadow detection. Jung's word shadow names the parts people hide, deny, or project. Many empaths have a finely tuned radar for incongruence, the gap between what someone says and what their body or affect betrays. This is a tremendous capacity for insight, but it often becomes a call to rescue or repair. You see the hidden wound and immediately move to fix it, believing that your insight obligates you to solve a stranger's darkness. That becomes intrusive and dangerous, both ethically and emotionally. The corrective practice is compassionate discernment with a specific boundary. Name one small limit you can apply immediately. When you detect shadow in a friend or partner, lean into curiosity without intervention. Ask one clarifying question that prioritizes consent. Can I ask about something I noticed? If they decline, respect it. If they accept, offer a reflective observation rather than a diagnosis. It looked like you tightened when the topic came up. Is that accurate? Then, regardless of their answer, hold a boundary. Time-limited support, referral to a professional if appropriate, or a physical limit such as, I can meet for 30 minutes. Scenario. At work you notice a colleague who smiles but freezes when criticized. Your impulse is to unburden them, to show them they're seen. Instead, you ask permission. I'm noticing something. Would it be okay to bring it up? They say yes, and you offer a single reflective sentence and a resource. You didn't fix their shadow. You protected your own system and offered a compassionate, limited bridge. In Jungian psychology, shadow work is not about exposing others. It is about integrating what we project. The moment you believe your insight grants you superiority, you have fallen into your own shadow. The spiritual secret here is humility, using perception first on yourself. These first three abilities often operate together because of the same developmental roots. A child who needed to keep a parent calm to avoid punishment developed a blend of field perception, pattern recognition, and shadow detection. Those skills saved them. As adults, the work is not to eradicate the skills, but to put a vetted switch on them. Use them to navigate safety, not to inhabit other people's inner weather. Ability 4, trajectory perception. This one is more uncomfortable than the others because it doesn't deal with what is happening. It deals with what is coming. Have you ever known, quietly and early, how something would end? A relationship, a partnership, a friendship, not because you were cynical, but because something in you had already mapped the direction. Trajectory perception is that internal mapping system. It senses patterns unfolding across time. Jung might say it reflects the psyche's capacity to recognize repeating complexes before they fully manifest. You feel not just the present moment, but its momentum. The misuse here is not ignorance, it is self-betrayal. You sense the direction clearly, but you stay. You rationalize. You invest more hope than evidence. Hope becomes a substitute for discernment, and slowly your energy drains, not because you didn't know, but because you didn't act. If this part feels uncomfortably accurate, take a moment to click the like button. That tells me this deeper, more honest exploration is worth continuing on this channel. The corrective practice is alignment through immediate measured action. When you sense a trajectory emerging, for example, emotional unavailability, translate that perception into one concrete behavioral adjustment. Schedule a clarifying conversation, reduce access, create time-limited checkpoints. Acting is not aggression, it is coherence. It is allowing your behavior to match your perception. When you do this consistently, trajectory perception stops being a source of anxiety and becomes a source of quiet authority. Picture a business partnership where you sense a slow slide toward disrespect. Instead of holding your breath and hoping, you schedule a review, clarify responsibilities, and set measurable checkpoints. If the behavior doesn't shift, you have already reduced your exposure. Trajectory perception becomes your early warning system, not a reason to cling. Ability 5, energetic resonance. This is the nervous system level syncing that happens when you feel someone else's pulse in your chest, mimic their posture, or absorb their agitation unconsciously. Resonance is a primitive form of empathy that lubricates social cohesion. Misused, it becomes automatic synchrony without return. You match and stay matched, never recentering, and thereby lose yourself to another's emotional tempo. The corrective practice is conscious activation and immediate return to baseline. Learn a short bodily cue to enact when you realize you've resonated. 3 clear in and out breaths and a small physical gesture. A shake of your hands, a stamp of the feet, or saying quietly to yourself, "Back to me." This signals your nervous system to disengage from the resonance and re-establish your physiological baseline. You're not rejecting the other person's state. You're choosing to contain it so you can decide how deeply to engage. Example: you're in a difficult family dinner and the anxiety of a relative sweeps through you. You notice your shoulders tense. You breathe, you place your hand on your knee and feel it there and silently say, "Back to me." The family conversation continues, but you no longer carry the amplified anxiety home. You stayed present and protected. Ability 6, dimensional perception. This is where empathy begins to border on something spiritual. Dimensional perception is the ability to hold multiple layers of a person simultaneously. Who they are today, who they were shaped to be, and who they might become if their inner conflicts were integrated. Jung might describe this as perceiving not only the ego, but the tension between ego and self, the visible personality and the deeper organizing center of the psyche. When you possess this capacity, you don't just see behavior. You sense unfinished stories, unresolved complexes, archetypal patterns playing out beneath ordinary conversation. You may look at someone and intuit both their wound and their potential. That is not fantasy. It is pattern perception extended across time. The danger is inflation. Jung warned about identification with insight, mistaking perception for authority. When dimensional seeing turns into compulsion, you begin explaining people to themselves, interpreting their motives without invitation, or trying to accelerate their individuation process. But individuation cannot be forced from the outside. The corrective practice is what I call silent wisdom, When you perceive multiple dimensions in someone, pause. Hold the insight internally. Ask yourself, is this perception meant to guide my behavior or to be spoken? Often it is meant to guide your positioning. How close you stand, how much you reveal, how deeply you invest. In Jungian terms, this restraint protects both you and the other from projection. You are not claiming to know their self. You are simply respecting the symbolic depth of what you perceive. Sometimes the most ethical use of insight is containment. Imagine seeing a friend's self-sabotage clearly. Instead of delivering a sweeping interpretation, you allow their psyche its own timing. You offer presence, not penetration. You protect your energy, and you trust that transformation unfolds when the individual is ready. This is where empathy matures into spiritual discipline. Let's make this personal instead of abstract. You'll recognize absorption when you leave a conversation heavier than when you entered it, replaying someone else's emotions in your body as if they were your own. You'll recognize abandonment of inner knowing when you feel a quiet internal warning, and override it because hope feels kinder than truth. Rescue appears when insight turns into urgency, when seeing someone's wound convinces you that you are responsible for healing it. Hope as self-abandonment shows up when your foresight whispers, "This won't end well," but you stay anyway, waiting for a different ending. Automatic resonance reveals itself when you match someone's anxiety or anger and forget to return to yourself. And oversharing happens when your insight spills out before consent has been given, turning perception into intrusion. These patterns are subtle, but once you can feel them happening in real time, you begin to regain authorship of your energy. The difference between an exhausted empath and a conscious one is not sensitivity, it is repetition, the pause, the trust tag, the boundary, the measured action, the return to baseline, the silent containment of insight. Practiced daily, they reshape your default responses. Practice them in small, visible ways. Start with the pause question. When a strong mood or impression lands, stop and ask, "Is this mine?" Give yourself 2 breaths before acting. Add the trust tag to new relationships. When you feel a spike in pattern recognition, say to yourself, "Flagged," maintain distance, and then limit exposure. Experiment with one compassionate boundary this week. Decide on a time, topic, or physical limit you can state kindly. Use conscious return when you feel resonance. 3 breaths plus a small physical cue to return to your baseline. Finally, cultivate silent wisdom. When you see a multi-layered truth about someone, hold it and only act if your action is clearly helpful and consent-based. What does the life of a conscious empath look like? It's waking up without the sense that you must be a container for everyone else. It's having relationships where you can both perceive and withhold, where you can act on warning signals without becoming paranoid, where your insights are used sparingly and effectively. You still notice the room, you still detect trajectories, but you no longer wake in the night with strangers' burdens. You move through the world with clarity and tenderness. Boundaries are not walls for you. They are instruments of compassion. Discernment becomes an act of love for others and for yourself. Contrast that with the exhausted empath, collapsed social life, chronic fatigue, self-doubt, a resume of relationships where you were there to heal but never healed. The difference is not who you are, it's the training you give yourself now. Jung taught us to regard these phenomena as meaningful. Your job as a conscious empath is to let meaning guide practice. If you want structure, give yourself a month of disciplined attention. Spend the first week simply separating what is yours from what is not. In the second, begin tagging patterns instead of chasing them. In the third, state one boundary clearly in one relationship. In the fourth, practice returning to yourself when resonance pulls you outward, and hold at least one deep perception in silence for a full day before acting on it. Small practices, repeated. That is how individuation moves, not through intensity, but through integration. a final word on ethics and power. Your empathic abilities grant you access to elements of other people's interiority. That access is a responsibility. Do not use your sensitivity to manipulate or to prove moral superiority. Do not expose or shame. Use discernment to protect yourself and to offer help only when it is invited or when safety demands intervention. Silent wisdom and measured action are forms of respect, both to others and to the integrity of your own nervous system. According to Carl Jung, the psyche speaks in images, moods, and patterns. He taught us to listen seriously to those languages and to study their function. If you've felt labeled by others as too much or told your empathy is a weakness, reframe it. You are an instrument with incredible sensitivity. The question is not whether you have been gifted. The question is how you will be trained. For Jung, the psyche was not merely mechanical, it was symbolic. And symbols are spiritual in nature. When you train your empathic capacities consciously, you participate in individuation. You are not just managing emotions, you are refining your relationship to the unconscious. So begin. Practice the pause. Tag your patterns. Set one small boundary this week. Use your foresight to act, your resonance to return, and your dimensional seeing to hold sometimes in silence. These are not spiritual shortcuts. They are disciplined retrainings of a perceptual system that has served you and can serve you better. Learn the short scripts, the breathing cues, the boundary language that make these skills alive in ordinary moments. Sensitivity is not your weakness. Untrained sensitivity is. You can perceive deeply without dissolving. You can remain open without being invaded. And when perception is disciplined, empathy stops being exhaustion and becomes strength. If you stayed until the end, let me know by writing in the comments, perception without possession. I've placed another lesson on your screen right now that continues this path of disciplined inner development. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.